Dr. Jim and Anna Lee are kicking off our first talk on this series, which is very appropriate. Jim is a graduate of Notre Dame, did his undergrad, his PhD work there. He is professor of early Christian studies at SMU University. Anna is a graduate of Mary Hardin Baylor. She's a registered nurse here at Methodist. And the two of them actually got married in February of 2016. It's kind of a big deal. So they're still technically newlyweds for a few more days. They met here at the Young Adults. And so it's one of those, they were here from early on in the beginning. So it's been really neat just to see like God work in each one of their lives, how he has connected them, and just to see just kind of their outlook and how they did the whole pre-date, date, and what God's done in their lives. And so it just seemed very appropriate to have them come and share with you about marriage, the ultimate relationship goal. So if y'all would, y'all give it up for Jim and Anna Lee.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Great. As Brandon said, my name is Jim. I'm delighted to be here with all of you. I teach theology at SMU, and as Brandon mentioned, I graduated from Notre Dame. Go Irish. Notre Dame is a very special place to me because it's where I became Catholic. I was raised Presbyterian, but after studying the early church fathers, I decided to become Catholic. So I've been Catholic now for 14 years. It's been great. And as Brandon mentioned, I met Anna here at St. Thomas Aquinas. We dated and we got married on February 13th, so we're coming up on our one-year anniversary. And it's close to Valentine's Day, so I'll never forget our anniversary.
Planning.
Yes. Now, we only have one microphone, so we're going to share this between us. Here's Anna.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Anna Lee, and I'm Jim's wife. A little bit of my background: I was raised a virtuous pagan by virtuous pagan parents, and I went to Mary Hardin Baylor, like Brandon said, which is a Baptist college. But after a couple of years of Baptist theology, I was like, I need to become Catholic now. So I converted when I was 20 years old, back in 2010, and I moved to Dallas about almost 4 years ago for my first job as a registered nurse. And then I met Jim here at St. Thomas, and we dated, and we got married, and we're actually expecting our first child in June. And so we're just going to share with you a little bit about our story, basically how we discern God's call to love and serve one another. And we're just really happy to be here, so thank you so much for coming and listening to us and letting us share with you and give back to a group that really helped us discern our vocations to love and serve one another. And Jim's going to begin with a word from our friends, the Saints.
Thank you, dear. Well, before we share our experience, we thought we'd like to say a few words about the process of discernment and vocation, and what it means to discern your vocation. The word vocation comes from the Latin vocare, which means to call. So a vocation is a calling from God. God is calling each one of us to a particular vocation. But there is also a general vocation, and the saints help us in understanding what this vocation means. In particular, I've chosen St. Therese of Lisieux, one of my favorite saints and a saint that we have a devotion to. And St. Therese says that all of us are called to holiness. This is the universal call. And she says this is essentially the call to love. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, in fact, quotes St. Therese's book, The Story of Her Soul. It's her autobiography. And the Catechism says, this is the Story of a Soul, which is quoted by the Catechism. Love, in fact, is the vocation, which includes all others. It's a universe of its own, comprising all time and space. It is eternal. So all Christians, every single one of us, is called to love. That's the general call, or the general vocation. But within that vocation, you also have a particular vocation, a way that you are called to love and serve God and His church in a particular way. So there is the general vocation, which the Second Vatican Council speaks of as the universal call to holiness. We are all called to holiness. And this holiness can take different states of life. For instance, it can take the single life, which all of us begin as. And once we're single, we start seeking holiness in our single state. That can lead to consecrated celibacy or holy orders as well, in the case of priests, bishops, and deacons. Then there's also the next sacrament, the sacrament of matrimony, which is another state of life. And that is a particular vocation to love and serve a person. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, we have another saint to help us, another one of our favorites, Pope St. John Paul II. And in his book, Love and Responsibility, he says that spousal love, the love that's shared between a man and a woman in the sacrament of marriage, is characterized by the reciprocal gift of self. So the unique charism, you might say, of marriage is the gift of one's entire self. It's not only the gift of one's self, it's also the reception of the other. So in other words, it's not just about how much you can give someone, it's also about receiving them in love. So it's a kind of reciprocal love. And that sort of self-emptying love and that self-receptive love is what images the Trinity. Because the Trinity is the perfect communion of self-emptying and self-receptive love. And the Catechism says that marriage safeguards this mutual love, which becomes an image of Christ's love for the church. So when a man and a woman love each other in the sacrament of marriage, it is meant to be an image of how Christ loves his spouse, which is the church. And so we have a picture of us on our wedding day. Father John there, celebrating Eucharist. The Catechism says Christian marriage in its turn becomes an efficacious sign, the sacrament of the covenant of Christ and the church. So our lives become sacramental. Our lives are a sign of Christ's love for the church. And Christ's love for the church is made present in the Eucharist. So every time we receive the Eucharist, we receive Christ's love for his bride, the church, which is each one of us. So the Eucharist, you could say, is the source and summit of all of the sacraments. The very grace that we find in the sacrament of marriage has as its source the Eucharistic love of Christ for the church. So there's a little bit about the sacrament of matrimony. Since I teach theology, I couldn't help it. I'm going to turn it over now to Anna to share a little bit about our story.
Thank you. You mean the PowerPoint, though.
Oh, yes, okay.
So, our story began in, I guess technically, February 2014, and we were introduced at a young adults event. And I came away knowing three things. Jim's name was Paul.
She thought my name was Paul for several months.
Yes. He was writing a book on St. Augustine, and his mother had just moved to town. So honestly, for about the next 6 months, after I finally learned that his name was Jim, I would say, "Hi, Jim.
Hi, Anna.
How are you?"
I'm well. How are you?
"I'm good, thanks. And how's the book coming along?"
It's coming along pretty well.
"Good. And how's your mom?"
Oh, she's great.
"Good. Have a great day." It wasn't until we went to one of the summer kickball events that the diocese put on, and I actually
She
brought...
liked my kickball skills.
That's it. Yes. One of my friends, Karen, actually talked to Jim, and when I was giving her a ride back to her house, Karen turned to me and said, "You know, you really need to date / marry Jim or a man just like him." So.
Thank you, Karen.
And
She's not here.
no, she's not. So that was the first time I was like, really? And throughout the next couple months, a few friends really encouraged us to date the other person, to get to know the other person, which was very helpful. Which kind of brings us to our first point. We were able to meet in a community, the community of St. Thomas in particular, and then the community of our friends that were kind enough to encourage us to date and rather open our eyes to one another.
So we had the context to get to know each other in a broader community. And my friends were sometimes more subtle than others. For instance, Renee once told me,
Sorry.
Renee once said very subtly, "Hey, you know Anna, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "You should really date her." I said, "Okay."
So, all joking aside, that really helped. Knowing one another in the community, being able to ascertain Jim's character in a group setting, and really just kind of forming a friendship with him and enjoying the time that we would spend together with our friends. When Jim finally asked me out on our date, I was very excited, and I really felt very confident in saying yes because we had that groundwork of friendship for a couple months before. And another really important caveat for us had already been decided. We had already independently discerned out of religious vocation. So we both very strongly felt a general call to marriage. And so we felt very free to date one another. So do you want to pick up the story from there?
Sure. Thank you. As Anna was saying, we had discerned that it was not our call to religious life. I discerned the possibility of being called to priesthood. Anna had also discerned the possibility of religious life for herself. But since we had both sort of discerned out of that, that led to a certain kind of freedom for us. And it reminds me of a story of two other saints, Saints Louis and Zélie Martin. They are the parents of Saint Therese of Lisieux. And they had 8 children. Unfortunately, all of the boys died. But the 5 girls who survived, they all ended up entering the convent. And they will probably all be saints, I would imagine. But both of them had discerned religious life independently, and they had both been kicked out of their orders, or asked to leave, very politely. And eventually they met each other, and they discerned that they were called to marry. So Louis and Zélie Martin have been special patrons for us as well. And meeting Anna and dating Anna was great. I think I always appreciated that Anna was open to talking about all kinds of things, talking about our faith and sharing our faith. We often met each other at daily mass here at St. Thomas Aquinas, so that was wonderful, and we prayed together. We both had devotions to Mary, so that was just very natural for us to pray the rosary together, and that's something that we still love to do. It's probably what I enjoy the most, is praying the rosary with Anna. I'm grateful that we had the chance to get to know each other and to share our faith. I think that was perhaps the most important foundation for us moving forward. Dear, did you want to continue? Sorry.
Sorry. I just don't want to snatch the microphone. So like Jim said, we were able to share our faith. We saw each other very frequently at Mass, at the St. Thomas Young Adults events, still staying in the community, and that was just really great. But we also had a lot of fun too. And it was just, really a good time of just enjoying being with the other person, getting to know Jim and what he liked to do and the things he found funny and his favorite movie and his favorite board game. And so it was a really good mixture of having a solid foundation in the faith, but also just developing a genuine affection and liking for who God created Jim to be and who Jim is. And that was really helpful. On one of our dates, we were able to kind of clarify that we both felt called generally to marriage. And that was pretty helpful. That was very helpful because we knew, okay, we're really discerning something here. We're having a great time, and that's lovely, but it's not just casual dating, like there's no real affection. And so that was very comforting. One conversation we had, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Can you read my mind?
That's about my roommate.
Right. So Jim had a great group of friends that were his roommates in graduate school. Sorry, thank you, dear. But in Dallas, he was living alone. And so I just asked him, well, why the change in lifestyle? And he said, well, I'm really hoping and praying about different things. And I'm hoping to meet my future spouse and to get married. And not that dating should be about check boxes, but I thought to myself, okay, I am also interested in marriage, generally. And from that point forward, we knew, okay, we could discern this together. And me being very nervous, I had to ask him, I never really dated and discerned before. What does that look like? And what are kind of your thoughts on that? And Jim, in his really great, gentle way, just said, well, discernment is really about doing God's will. So as long as we pray for the willingness to do God's will and we will the best for each other, we simply can't go wrong here. So, and he fleshed that out saying, whether it's a positive discernment, i.e., we continue on, get engaged, get married, or it's a negative discernment and we don't feel called to love and serve one another, it's good either way. And that was a really important caveat because it gave me the true freedom to not be afraid of the future and not be afraid of God's will for us, whatever it was, together or apart. And of course, probably a couple of you are like, yes, but how did you get to the together part? And so I'll hand it back to Jim to talk about that.
Thank you. Well, as Anna was saying, we took our time to discern. We enjoyed spending time to one another. One thing I really appreciated about Anna is that she said, hey, when you're first dating, you should just enjoy each other's company. So, taking it pretty light, not too serious, not getting too caught up in it. But we also had really good, deep conversations. And I was able to share at one point a story that my mother used to talk with me about. She used to say that the most important thing in life is God. That God is our true happiness. And that no person can ever fulfill us and make us truly happy the way God can. And my mother is a very devout woman. She's very faithful. And so this had always colored my view of relationships. She used to say that no person could make you truly happy the way only God can. If you try to make someone your happiness, it's like putting your hat on a hook that can't support it. Because only God can fulfill that deepest longing in your heart. So whenever I looked at dating, then I understood what I really want in this process is both of our goods. That is, I want us to discern what God's calling us to, and I want Anna's good as much as my good. Now, I'm hoping that her good is me. Well, I'm hoping that her good is that we're called to love and serve one another in the vocation of marriage. But Thomas Aquinas says, a true charity is to will the good of the other. And so whenever you're dating, it helped me anyway to remember that. To remember that if I'm really going to love Anna, no matter what we're called to, I'm going to will her good. That's the priority. Another thing that helped a lot in dating Anna is that I always felt like she appreciated me and respected me and didn't look at me as a person that she could get something out of. Maybe one way to say it is, she wasn't just dating me to get married. She really wanted to discern God's will. And so instead of feeling like an object, I felt like she really wanted to seek the good for me as well. And I think that's a great example of what John Paul II was talking about, the mutual gift of self, seeking the good of the other. I think there's one final point here that we want to make.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that?
Why don't you talk about
Okay.
talking about?
Sorry, we're learning how to share the stage. So our discernment was going well. And one thing I do want to remind y'all, this is our experience and our story, and thank you for being so receptive. It's not necessarily rules for dating or things you have to do to get the end game, which is marriage. It's more things for y'all to consider, maybe to pray about, or just think about kind of as you discern whatever God's will for you is, be it single life or religious life or the sacrament of matrimony. So things were going very smoothly at this point. Affection was growing. We both felt very confirmed in the community. We were able to pray and go to Mass together. But we did have a conflict. And it was especially our first conflict. And I won't go into the details because the details aren't important.
Everyone fights, right?
Right.
Everyone argues.
Right. But after this conflict, I was very nervous because I thought, well, I've ruined it now. This is it. He's going to cut and run. Knew it. Too good to be true. So after apologizing to Jim, I just told him this, like, I just feel really worried that now that we've argued, you're not going to want to continue to discern anymore. And Jim, you always know what to say. He told me something that...
I'm glad you think that.
Oh, sorry, I'm being sincere. I'm being sincere. That was not sarcastic. I'm being sincere. He just very calmly told me, well, love is a gift that is freely given. And you can't earn somebody's love. And conversely, you can't do anything that will make them basically love you less. And he also told me that he forgave me, which was very, very important. But this was very important because it gave us another element of freedom in that, you know, in every relationship there are highs and lows, and whatever God's will for us was, we could get through it together. Even when one or both of us had made a mistake or hurt one another. And that was one of the most essential piece. That was a very essential piece to, wow, this is really all green flags. This is a really good thing. And that was one other point we wanted to make, that in dating, a lot of people feel anxious, like, oh, how can I make this person like me more, or so on. But affection is a gift freely given. And
Yes.
is that, would you like to flesh that out, or?
Well, thank you, dear. One thing I would say about Anna, she's very good at conflict resolution. She's very good at saying, forgive me, I'm sorry. And she's also very good at saying, I forgive you, which I need all the time too. So I appreciate that about Anna. That's one thing that I've learned from her as well. I tend to think about things and stew on things, but she can really let them go. So I admire that, and that's something that I've learned and admired about her and grown from our relationship. I'd just like to bring our talk here to a close by sharing a couple last thoughts on the sacrament of matrimony, since it is, after all, the title of our talk as the ultimate goal. And here's an icon. Does anyone know what this icon is?
The wedding.
Yes, the wedding feast of Cana. And what happens at the wedding feast of Cana?
It's a miracle.
Yes, it's a miracle. And the miracle is
Water turns
Jesus
to wine.
changes water into wine, right? Now this is the very first miracle that Jesus does. He does a miracle at a wedding feast. And he changes the water into wine. But he not only changes the water into wine, it's also a sign of the way that Christ is taking the natural good of matrimony, which is being celebrated by this couple, and showing that, in fact, it is a supernatural gift from God. He takes a natural good and he shows how he elevates it to the supernatural gift, a supernatural sacrament. So the wedding feast at Cana is an image of how matrimony is a natural good, but now becomes a source of grace in our lives. And one of the beautiful things about the sacrament of matrimony, here we are saying our vows to one another a year ago. I will not forget our anniversary. One of the beautiful things about the sacrament of matrimony is that the ministers of the sacrament are the couple, are the members of the couple themselves. We are the ministers of the sacrament, not the priest. The priest is the witness of the church, and it is necessary for the priest to be there as a witness of the church. But the couple themselves, they are the ministers of the sacrament. So we are the ones who enact the sacrament with one another. And what we offer to one another is not just a temporary thing. In sacraments there are elements or materials to every sacrament. Baptism, there's water. In the Eucharist, there's bread and wine. But in the sacrament of matrimony, we offer our entire lives as the material or the elements of the sacrament. So that's the great gift that we've been given, that we've been asked to share with one another. And we're grateful to be here together in this community. So if you'd like to read some more about the sacrament of marriage, here's some resources that might help you. Pope St. John Paul II's Love and Responsibility. The first 60 pages are pretty philosophical, so you might want to skip those. Go straight to the good stuff and then go back and read the philosophy a little bit later. Then there's Fulton Sheen's book, 3 to Get Married, which is a beautiful meditation on love, and it's very accessible, even to this day. And then Dietrich von Hildebrand has a beautiful short book called Marriage, the Mystery of Faithful Love. And now we want to thank you very much for your time and attention, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Monty.
Why did it take the suggestion of friends before you finally noticed each other? Why do you think that was the case?
Great question.
Yeah, I'll be happy to field the question. Thanks for the question, Monty. The question was, why did it take the suggestion of friends for us to notice one another? And I will say this, every person in their relationship with God and in their journey and in their vocation is kind of on a continuum. And after my friends suggested Jim as, a good Catholic man who they thought I would be compatible with, I took that really seriously because it came from friends who knew me very well. I did mention my friend Karen, but my friend Kristen over there also said, Jim's a really great guy. Have you thought about him? And so that was what was so helpful, I guess. Does that answer your question? Or am I answering your question enough? Or
Indirectly, I think you are.
okay. Sorry. So this is the thing. Dating is also very mysterious, and it's kind of like I can describe it, but it's hard to.
Is it maybe, I guess what I'm getting at or trying to imply with my question is, did you have certain boxes that needed to be checked off that because maybe you didn't see him, they went there on the facade, perhaps?
I think. Yeah, that makes sense. So my question is did I have certain boxes that needed to be checked? And I think if everyone looks, they have certain qualities they would really like in a life partner. And I'll share, one of mine was that I really wanted to marry a Catholic man. Because I am a convert, I did not grow up in a Catholic family. I wanted to have a Catholic family. So that was the main one, devout Catholic man. Now, with my eyes being open to Jim, I think it just took me a while to get to know Jim. And I'm actually fairly reserved, and so I was kind of watching back in the community, and then with the recommendations of my friends, I watched and listened and prayed more, and then realized, wow, I actually would really like to go out on a date with this gentleman. So is that better? Okay.
Well, from my perspective, as we mentioned, she thought my name was Paul.
Yeah.
That makes it difficult. But at first, actually, Anna was working nights after we met, and so our schedules didn't overlap very much. We didn't really have a chance to see each other too often. And the only time we did, she was very tired from working, but she remembered those questions. It was very good about my mother and the books. I appreciate that. But we never really had that chance to get to know each other. Finally, I think when her schedule changed a bit and we saw each other more frequently, I slowly started inviting her to some group events. So, for instance, we went to an SMU basketball game, and we went with 8 people. But I made sure that she sat in my group of 4, and then at halftime I switched seats so I could talk to her. So little things like that, and Anna was always very receptive to that, and she always let me know that she was having a very nice time. And that helped me a lot to know that she was certainly open to going further and dating some more. So maybe that answers the question. Any other questions? Yes, Nicholas.
So this question is for both of you individually. And when you guys were in your dating phase, so not so much going right into engagement or while you were engaged, but just in the dating phase, what was your favorite date that you went on and why?
Man, there were so many. Oh man, there were so. Sorry. Okay, I know what it is. So there were a lot of really great dates with Jim, but my favorite was Easter weekend, the year we dated, and Saturday night we went to the vigil, and then Sunday he had bought matinee tickets to see The King and I at the Dallas Summer Musical Theater. It's one of my favorite musicals, and it was just a really, really wonderful time. And yeah.
There are so many.
I know. We had a lot of fun. We really did.
Well, our
still do.
first date was 2-stepping. So I always associate our dating with dancing. We had a great time. We danced quite a bit. We still love to dance. So dancing is great. We also liked to watch movies together, and I'd have to say going to Mass. I don't know if you consider that a date, but that's certainly the best way to start, I think, meeting each other at Mass and praying together, and then going and enjoying our time together. So yeah, those are three things that come to mind. Any other questions? Yes?
So it's really funny. So we hear a lot this when you're dating, you're having so much fun, you're enjoying each other's company, and then you get married, you're like, just like some people would sound a little bit like real life sensitive. The question is, are you guys still having fun?
Oh, yeah, every day.
Still go on dates and have a good time?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. So we didn't really get into this officially with our talk, but we have been married about a year. And it's actually been a really great year. Like, I got to tell you guys, when you've discerned your vocation to love and serve somebody, it really only gets better. Like, your love really grows through marriage. And it's fun, but in a different way than dating is fun, because marriage has all the romantic and fun love of dating, but then you also have the very solid, this is our life together, these are our life plans. And so I would say, we usually laugh together a lot and just, again, still try and keep things light, even in really serious times. And that's kind of how you keep the love alive, if that makes any sense. Does that answer your question? So yes, we're still having lots of fun.
I would say yes, and I would say marriage is even more fun than dating, in the sense that I remember what Brandon once told me. He said, enjoy your time when you're newly married, because when the kiddos come along, there's going to be a lot more responsibility there. And so every night feels like a date. And I feel that way. I really do feel like every night I get to come home and we get to share our lives together. And just, pillow talk at night is one of the highlights of my day, and praying together. But yeah, we still make time to do fun things. We still go out and dance, but we are a little bit of homebodies now, that's for sure. But it's like the nature of love. Love deepens. The more you know someone, the deeper your love grows for them. And it might look a little bit differently than it did, but it's still fun and beautiful in new ways. That's been my experience. Yes, Hannah?
So coming from somebody who had never heard what it meant to discern, I know this isn't a discernment talk, but you both talked about how you both had discerned marriage.
Mhm.
Can you maybe talk a little bit just about that? Because I had never heard that before either until a couple years ago, and I was like, I'm not going to be a nut. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that was not something I ever thought about. But then people said, well, have you discerned your vocation? I'm like, well, yeah, like I've already known. But they're like, no, but have you actually discerned this? And I'm like, I don't know. So then I was like, am I supposed to be? Am I, like, then you point my phone, like, I don't know. So like, I don't know what discernment is. I still don't actually know what it is, but I know it's like a conversation. That's what it's God. And so that's kind of, my story's different. Like, I obviously know my vocation now, but I didn't know it back then. So can you talk a little bit about that?
You start. You have the better story, I think.
Thank you for the question. So the question is about the question of discernment of vocation before we dated. And for me, I discerned the possibility of priesthood, especially when I was in graduate school. I thought, I'm a young man, I love God, so why shouldn't I become a priest? And that's certainly something that I was open to. But as I went through this process, I joined a group of young men who were thinking of priesthood. We called ourselves the affiliates. So we weren't in seminary yet, but we were discerning seminary. As we went through that process, I made sure that I met with the spiritual director consistently. So that's something I would recommend for all of us to think about is having a spiritual director, someone who can sort of help you as you discern what God is calling you to in your whole life. And my spiritual director was a very wise priest. And he told me that whatever your vocation is, it's what God has made you to do. So it's already within you. It's not something that's way out there that you have to kind of go explore and find like it's under a rock somewhere. Oh, yes, my vocation. Or if you hadn't found that rock, I'd be in a lot of trouble. No, it's deep within your heart. God has already made it. He knew you before he knit you in the womb. And my vocations director said, it may not be an obvious or apparent thing, but whatever God is calling you to will resonate within you. And he used the analogy. He said, imagine when you ping or when you flick a pole that's hollow, and it sort of makes this noise that resonates throughout it. you can hear the noise go all the way through. Well, that's an image of how your vocation should be. Whatever God's calling you to should resonate throughout your life. And it should, in some way, touch your desires, your deep desires. That doesn't always mean that you're going to be called to do what's the most pleasurable for you or the most fun, because there are going to be times when you're going to struggle, right? Your vocation is to follow Christ, to take up your cross and follow Christ. So there will be moments of struggle and suffering and imitation of Christ in the midst of your vocation. But ultimately, it should resonate with your identity, with who you are, who God has made you to be. And there are many different ways, my spiritual director told me, to look at this in your life. Look at the gifts that God has given you. Look at the desires of your heart, and look at what the needs are of the church and how you can best serve the church. I thought for me that might be priesthood, but anytime I prayed about priesthood, it was very dark. Not dark in the good way that, there's darkness where you're going through purification and God is leading you through that darkness. That's a good kind of darkness, but it was almost a kind of hopelessness for me when I thought about the future, because I couldn't picture my life. There was no trajectory for me. There was no resonance. And I kind of compare it a little bit to when Abraham was taking Isaac up the mountain. God asked him to sacrifice his only son. And Abraham's whole identity was based on the fact that he had a son. It was the idea that he would have many generations through him. Now God was asking him to sacrifice his son. So I thought in many ways, maybe God was asking me to sacrifice what I wanted, and was I willing to do that? And ultimately, in the story, the angel comes and stays the hand of Abraham, and he doesn't, in fact, sacrifice his son. But he wanted to see if Abraham was willing to do that. So I often felt that was sort of my story, was to discern if I would be willing to make a sacrifice for God, whatever that would look like. And I think all of us should be asking, what is it that God's asking us to do, so that we might love and serve him the best, that we might love and serve the church, and that we might become a saint. Because that's the purpose of our entire lives, to become a saint.
Just for my part, it was actually very simple to discern out of religious life. Y'all know I was a convert, and my parents were at the time not Catholic. They're coming back now. So I listened to a talk that said it's the duty of every young single person to discern, their vocation, and especially if you're Catholic, you should discern if you have a vocation to the religious life. And so I took that very seriously, and I was praying the rosary every day, asking God, what is your will for me, and what is my vocation? And I actually signed up for a vocation discernment retreat here in Dallas for about 6 weeks out. And I shared that with some of my family and friends, both Catholic and non-Catholic, and they were pretty surprised. And I was like, well, it's just a go and see. We'll see, we'll pray about it. But actually leading up to that event, I cried every single day for 2 weeks straight at the thought of going. Because I realized that the loss of the Catholic family life would be really, really terrible for me. And so then I actually heard a homily during Vocations Week in the diocese that said, I can't remember which priest gave it, but they said, it's an error to think that the vocation of religious life and the vocation of matrimony are separate, because we need good families to raise good priests and nuns and consecrated celibate people. And after that I thought, well, my contribution to the need for vocations, I don't think is going to be actually joining an order. It's going to be to pray to have a Catholic husband and have a Catholic family, and hopefully maybe they'll join an order or their children will. And so, again, even though we talk about the vocation of marriage, truly both vocations, whether to single religious life, holy orders, or to marriage and family, they're entwined, ultimately. And does that answer your question, Hannah? Sorry. Thank you. Oh, oops, sorry.
Yeah, no, let me just ask this real quick, because right from my perspective, like I hear y'all's story, and it's beautiful, right? It seems like with this relationship, you did it the right way, and that was how you were able to discern through it. But I know, like for me, for example, and I would say a lot of people in the room have gone through relationships and done it all the wrong way. You know what I'm saying?
Same.
Yeah, no,
Same.
okay, so, so this is what I wanted to kind of hear from, like, what are some of the things that maybe you did in this relationship, without going into, any compromising details, that was different than maybe past relationships that gave you a clarity and made this relationship different? Because I know I did my relationship with my wife completely different than I had in any other relationship, and there's probably a reason why we got married not only as quick as we did, but we're able to avoid a lot of the heartache that I'd experienced and done with other people.
For myself, in answer to Brandon's question, for myself, starting off with dating a devout Catholic man who loved God and loved the church was very, very important. And I think that in itself was very protective for our relationship. And also recognizing that, especially once you know your general vocation to marriage, it's your responsibility to hand over the particular discernment of the particular vocation to God fully. And I know that sounds like very vague and very spiritual, but I think the truth of it is why we were able to discern so clearly is both of us were every day praying, we put one another and this relationship at the service of God's will, whatever it is for us, whether to continue on, whether to break up. And I know it sounds very mysterious, like dating, on the one hand, it's like you can have the check boxes and these are the things I need, these are the non-negotiables, which are not bad. But then on the other hand, it's also sort of a mystery. And so, yeah, sorry, Grant, does that kind of help at all or clarify, clear as mud? Okay.
I mean, basically, I wanted to hear all like the blood and guts and the horror, life sucking before committed relationships bad, and then like you killed it on this one, and we're gonna.
I had that experience. I won't go into the details.
No, please don't.
I was single for a long time, actually, and it was difficult for me because I always felt that call to marriage. And I want to go back to what Hannah was saying. I do want to encourage everyone to consider, if you're single, that God might be calling you to a vocation of consecrated celibacy or to holy orders, because that's a beautiful, beautiful vocation, and it's certainly something we should all be open to. And we all have a natural desire for marriage. So sometimes it's difficult for us to discern whether or not that's our call, our particular vocation, or our general vocation. So I just want to encourage everyone to discern that. I know for myself, I'd taken that time to discern, and in graduate school in particular, after I'd kind of gone through that, I realized that was not what God was calling me to. And so I just started praying for my future spouse every day as I was making the long, cold drive to Notre Dame in the snow. I would pray for my future spouse, and every year it seemed like there were some opportunities. There were people that I would meet, and I would think maybe this was a possibility, but it didn't resonate. It didn't resonate with my life, and I couldn't picture, I couldn't visualize, in a sense. I didn't have a vision of my life with that person. So when I met Anna, it was totally different. When I met Anna, I think what was different is again, we were on the same page about what we wanted, what we were pursuing. We had the freedom to discern that, and also, I had this opportunity to visualize our life together, which I hadn't had before. I can remember one thing Anna told me. She said that the best part about being married wasn't necessarily that you're married. Sometimes in our culture, we act like, oh, once you get married, like your life begins, as if your life before that wasn't a beginning. But that's really not the best way to look at it, I don't think. I think your whole life is preparing you for it. Your whole life is preparing you to seek holiness, so that when that vocation comes along, you'll be open and ready. And Anna said that the most important thing she was looking forward to was receiving the Eucharist together with her husband, because the Eucharist is the source of the love that's in marriage, the source of all that grace. And so when she said that, I immediately could picture us together. I don't know what it was, but I could visualize us kneeling and receiving the Eucharist together. And I'd never had that with anyone before. So that really had made a deep impression on me. There wasn't a single moment when I finally said, oh, she's the one, or anything like that. I wish I could say there was, and that it were the same for everyone. But it's really not a one-size-fits-all. I think it's more that everyone's unique, everyone's mysterious. And in this case, it wasn't one particular thing that led me to discern that Anna was the right person for me. It was more, like Newman says, there are 1,000 things in the right direction. Cardinal Newman famously said he became a Catholic not because of one argument, but because there were thousands of arguments that all pointed in the same direction. And I felt similarly with Anna, that there were many, many different things that were all going in the right direction. So
I think
Courtney,
Catherine-
and then, yes.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Yeah.
I actually have 2 questions.
Ask your best one.
Okay, I'll ask my best one then. Could y'all tell your proposal story from It was huge.
I'll share that one.
Yeah, you tell it, because you planned it. You're the one who sweated through it, so. That's true.
So, well, I managed to get Anna very upset at me on the day that I was going to propose to her. And she had good reason, because I was late. And we were going to go to Mass together here at St. Thomas Aquinas at the 6:15 Mass.
But we wanted to go to confession before, and y'all know that line for confession on Thursdays is out the door if you don't get there 45 minutes before confession starts. We knew this. And he was never late. Like, he was never late. Ever. So, sorry.
So on this day, but the reason why I was late is a good one. The reason I was late is because the ring was being polished. So I had to wait with the jeweler, and I'm like, oh, I have to get there. I have to pick her up at 4:30, so we can get there early. Well, 4:30 rolls by, and they're like, the ring isn't ready yet. We're still finishing it up, and I had some custom touches. I had in the bracket of the diamond, there's an M for Mary, Queen of Heaven. So they had to do this special design in the ring, and I'm waiting, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, she's gonna be so upset. I don't even have flowers. Finally, 4:45 comes, and the ring is ready, so I race down there, and I pick her up in Uptown, and Anna's a little bit upset, but she's very calm in the way she says it. How did you say it to me?
I'm a little upset because you were late, and you know how important being on time for confession and Mass is to me, and you never do this. She really does like this. This is really the first time
She's very
we've ever
calm.
done
She's very calm. She said, please don't do it again. I understand your work is very important to you.
I thought it was at work.
She thought I was caught up in my work, which happens. But so we got there. Thanks be to God, the confession lines were moving, so we were fine. We got to confession, and I had the ring in my pocket. She had no idea. We went to Mass. Afterwards, I asked Anna, I said, would you like to go up to the statue of Our Lady and say our devotion together, which we always did.
Not unusual for us. I suspect nothing. Like,
So we went up and we started saying our prayer together, and then afterwards, I turned to her and I proposed. I had something. It went something like this, like, Anna, I love you with all my heart.
we don't need an
Oh, sorry.
reenactment.
Basically, I said, I believe God is calling us to love and serve one another in the sacrament of matrimony, and I'm ready to take the next step if you are. And I said, Anna Devenport said, will you marry me? And I knelt and I had the ring. And she said yes.
Yeah. Of course I said yes. Who wouldn't? So, and it was, anyway, it was a great day.
And I invited several friends from the young adults group to come, so we have some great pictures
Yeah.
from the front row. And afterwards, I planned a surprise party at my mother's house. So her parents actually flew in and came into the surprise party, and then some friends here all came together. So we had a nice celebration. So that's our engagement story.
Thanks for letting us share it. All right.
Another
One more
question?
Last question.
Mine's not as happy.
Oh, no.
I maybe was confused. In one of the parts you had said that Jim had said something like, if you love somebody, you can't do anything for them to love you less. And I maybe was confused because actually you can do things that for people to love you less and be like, actually this is not what I'm called to do in discern. So I don't know if you want to maybe I was just confused.
Can you clarify it? Because you
Yes.
always
Yeah.
explain it better.
Oh, thank you. That's not true. Thank you. Yes, you certainly wouldn't want to say, well, you can do anything you want to do and marry an axe murderer. That would not be good. So that wasn't the point I was trying to make. The point I was trying to make was that just as love is not a gift that you earn, so I didn't want her to feel anxious about being in a place where if she said something or made a mistake or did something wrong, that somehow that would be it, that I would instantly reject her, and vice versa. I think the idea I was trying to get at is that if we're called to love and serve one another, if that's what God is calling us to do, and we both feel confirmed in that vocation, then any argument we might have is something we can work through. And one way I like to talk about it is saying that we're on the same side. We're working together. We're on the same team. And so when you're working together and pursuing holiness, you're not thinking about, well, I'm just going to cut this person off now because I'm not getting anything out of this person anymore. So I'm trying to move away from the idea of a kind of utilitarian view of another person, that either they contribute to your happiness or take away from it, and thereby you make a decision whether or not you're going to continue to date them. I was instead trying to say if we really do love each other, and if that love is a gift, it's a gift that we freely give, then we shouldn't worry about that. If we're pursuing God's will and discerning it together, we'll make a positive discernment, whether we're called to be together or not.
Does that help clarify what we were trying to say? Okay. I apologize that was not very clear initially. So, ideally, we wanted to close with a decade of the Rosary. Do we have time for that, or do you want to close?
I mean, I'm going to be a bad human being if I say no.
Okay.
We got just one other quick question on a follow-up to what you were just saying, and then, we'll
Absolutely.
do that and close the deal.
So, we've recently read an article or a blog or whatever that stated that only whenever you allow yourself to feel exposed in a way, or vulnerable, maybe, that you can actually receive love, because love is risky, right? You run the risk of getting hurt. You run the risk of being, feel like you're less than, or it doesn't work. One person may feel certain things, and another person may feel a variation of other things too, and it doesn't line up. So long story short, how in your relationship, when you have these, basically the story is making your mess mine. Okay, so you have to kind of share in the mess if you have one. I mean, we're not perfect; we're all sinners
Right.
and everything else, and part of the course. So how do you share? How did you share? And if you can share a little bit about what that was like, and what the beautiful end result was whenever you actually got to share the love. But really, how that conversation really went down.
Okay.
Sorry, I set you up like that.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to clarify in my own mind what you're asking so I can
All right,
answer it well.
So 50%,
Sorry. Can you rephrase it for me?
50% of Americans or other folks in the whole entire world, they end up divorcing, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, we could probably have a show of hands. How many parents are divorced? Mine are. So, they probably didn't do things the right way. Some things don't line up. There's one thing in particular that shares that you're not basically allowing an opportunity for love to be fostered, because you're not allowing yourself to be, vulnerable. Did you guys ever experience anything like that? I know you guys basically are like the poster children for, marriage and whatnot. I think you need another couple of answers.
Oh, no. Sorry. We're obviously giving you the great highlights of our dating. Like I said, dating is mysterious and unique to every couple in some ways. And every couple does have its struggles. And I think that, to reiterate Jim's point from earlier in answer to your question, what has always helped us overcome it is recognizing that we are on the same team and we still will the good of the other, and reminding ourselves of that regardless of how we feel. And even when we are upset or angry or sad or not feeling loving. And it's a decision that you make, and sometimes we do not always make it perfectly, to work together to overcome that, to remain open to the other. And anyway, I'm gonna let Jim pick it up because again, sorry. Is that?
You're good. Yeah.
I think, thank you for the question. I think vulnerability is a key piece of it. And just to share a little bit from my experience, there are a couple of things. My father died when I was in graduate school of cancer, something he had struggled with for many years. And remembering his death and going through all of that is very difficult for me. So sharing that with Anna is a vulnerability. And I can remember some of that experience and sharing that with her and wondering what her response was going to be, and not knowing what that would be like. And I wondered if instead she would be cold towards me, you might say. But instead, her response was, "Hold me."
It was so Sorry, it was really sad to hear about.
And I appreciated that. I appreciated that I could share something that was very difficult for me and that she would be open and receptive to it. I think vulnerability is key. I think even more key than that is the virtue of humility, because you need humility to be vulnerable with others. And I think sometimes, in our society especially, we are focused on ego and pride, and it fosters this sort of pride. But I think what helps us in relationships is to be humble and to recognize our dependence upon God first and foremost, and then also our openness to one another.
Does that help clarify it for you? Okay.
Let's clap. We're gonna make a couple
We'll make a couple of announcements and then finish with the prayer instead of like praying and then kind of breaking up the mojo. Cool. All right. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Now give it up again for. So, as they talked about, and I know just so much of what they communicated, and one reason why we wanted them to do so is I think it's really important to, right, whoever we are aspiring to be like, whatever we're aspiring to do, whether it's marriage or get the promotion in a job or be successful at this, it's really good to see people, right? There's plenty of examples of people that have done things the wrong way, or people that aren't successful at a particular thing, and why they're being humble and saying, no, they're not the poster children for marriage because they understand their own sin, right? Their own imperfections, their own things they struggle with. What I do and just grateful of and very thankful for just your example, because it's an encouragement to me, who's been married for 8 years. It's an encouragement hopefully to you all to realize that while we see examples and why, yes, divorce rate's 50%, and just we've all, I think, or a lot of us have been in relationships that were less than holy or really struggled through, that there really is a way that we can do it right and it be life-giving and it be something that, I mean, from the dating process through marriage, through, yes, having kids and going through the craziness that me and my wife have experienced, even through the craziness. And yes, you're right. I mean, before you have kids, like, you're on a date every night, whether you know it or not. And that's important to take advantage of. But nonetheless, right, kids come and God is purifying us and sanctifying us, and He loves us so much that whatever state He's calling to us in life, that it is, man. I mean, me and my wife, we've gone through crazy times we're going through right now, but it is bringing us closer together, because while I've done it the wrong way so many other times, the fact that Jesus Christ is the center of our relationship, right? And we do it imperfectly, but we do pray together, and we receive the sacraments together, and we encourage one another. And through that, and when Jesus Christ is the center of everything that we do, right, it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't mean that like everything's going to be not challenging, but what it does mean is that it's right, and it will be something of joy, and it will draw us closer to Him. And so whatever He calls us to, that's why He's calling us to it, is to bring us closer to Him, and right, to Him in the Eucharist. And that is ultimately why He's put you all together. And I think just the way I'll explain that and put it forth, I just want to say thank you, because it challenges me in my own marriage. It should challenge each one of us, right? Not that we got to be perfect to do it right, but that we have to seek Jesus Christ and His will for our lives. Why He created us. He created us for a purpose, to be in a relationship with Him, right? And that's why He's calling us to the state of life that He is. And when we do it that way, it is life-giving. It encourages people. It brings forth life. And it's a light to the world, and this world needs more stories like that and more examples. So let us, as a group, just continue to pray for one another, for marriages, for couples like Jim and Anna, that they would continue to be a light, and also for each one of us the opportunity to do so. So just because we screwed up in the past, or maybe we're in a relationship that is not good, it's not healthy, and we're sitting there thinking, oh crap, I'm glad they didn't ask me to come give this talk, because it would not have sounded like that. That's okay, right? Right? My talk that I would give now looks a lot different than it would 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever the case is. So just realize that when Jesus Christ is involved, He can redeem anything. He can take bad and turn it into good. So thanks be to God that grace reaches low, and it can make beautiful things out of a mess. So again, what's the point? The point's Jesus. I mean, like it is. And with Him and through His grace, man, stories like this are possible. Apart from Him, we see what happens apart from Him. Amen? Amen.
We had originally planned to close with the whole decade of the Rosary, but since it's getting a little late, and we would just like to offer an Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory Be for everyone here and their future vocations, and whether it's a future religious order or a future spouse. So if you'll pray with us.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Thank you guys so much. It was a privilege to talk to you.